Hi, everyone. So good to have you. So I'm Kendra, and you know my beautiful gluten detection dog, Suki, which Suki was in here laying on the bed, which the bed's all messed up. So you can tell where she left it behind. And I am here with Kari Bastyr, who is a gluten detection trainer. So I want to say hi, Kari.
Hi, everybody. I'm happy to be here. Birdie's somewhere. She's downstairs somewhere. Sure, she'll make an appearance.
So we've got a ton of people. So you want to train your dog, as somebody just put in the chat, a gluten detection dog. And that is a great question. You can, Carrie and I have developed some courses to help you start the process properly. So we have courses on our website at celiacservicedogs.com, and that gets you going. Now, if you already have your dog, you have to have your dog evaluated and decide if your dog is the right. So one of the questions that we had was, what breed is the right breed? What age is the right breed? Carrie, do you want to start with that question?
Sure. Well, we like to start as soon as possible. Some dogs do okay if they start later. I try and keep it right around 2 or 3. Is probably more ideal because it does take 2 years to train to finish a gluten detection dog. So if you have a 2 or 3 year old and it takes 2 years and your dog is 4 or 5 by the time you finish, and then you only have a certain window for them to work for you the rest of their life. But it definitely depends on the dog too. And we do like to start as early as possible. I have 2 puppy litter mates in my program right now. They're different handlers. And they started right at 9 weeks. And I've had a couple that start right at 9 weeks. I've had some that start at 1, 2. I have a little cockapoo named Stanley. He started when he was 4. He's actually a trained, fully finished service dog for POTS. I don't know if Christy's on here. Christy, say hi if you are. And so she wanted to add in gluten detection, and he's doing really well. So yeah, I mean, it depends on if you have a dog that might work. If not, starting with a puppy and going through the process would be a better option. But again, it all depends. But the courses definitely outline that kind of the breeds and ages and when you start and what it looks like.
Yeah, we go through all that. In really, the breed in terms of what dog that you get depends on what your needs are, your lifestyle, your abilities. I did a video on it earlier today, but that we walk through, like, how do you decide what are the things in and out? One thing that we do get questions, and I see one in here too. So, an 8-year-old Yorkie poo that loves to learn new tricks. But the challenge is, again, the age. You're at 8, then you go a couple more years of training. That ends up the dog's already getting older, and to work out in public and things like that, it's a lot of commitment to train a dog. And you don't necessarily, most people don't want to put the time and the costs in training a dog that is probably only going to work for a few years, because they just are tired as they get older and they want to sleep more, and you're not going to be taking them all over because it is physically demanding. I'd say with a Yorkie poo too, the size is going to be an issue. I mean, one of the challenges is having the dog be the right size, especially because of the mechanics of it. So if you're in a grocery store, you're not sitting, and you have to bend like literally to the ground to have the dog check. That ends up being really difficult on you as the handler and the dog as well. In a restaurant, it's a similar thing. So that's part of the issue with having a really small dog like that isn't recommended. The other part of that issue is that it's mechanically hard for the dog too, because they'll be jumping up. So my friends have a Maltipoo, and he's probably about Suki's best friend. You've probably seen pictures of Nabi, but when he comes over and Suki's checking stuff for me, he wants to check too, but he has to like jump up on his back legs, and that's just hard on a dog, especially as they get older and things like that. And then the final part is just in public. I mean, Suki's 50 pounds. She gets stepped on a lot, and that's hard for a little dog. You don't necessarily want that. So
I try and
Yeah.
stay right around like 30 pounds or bigger, give or take.
One of the big questions I think that everybody asks is how much does it cost? And one of the things about training is it depends on, and we go through this in detail in our first course in terms of the costs and things like that, because you have the cost of the dog, and that does vary by dog. And what kind of dog you get and where you get it and things like that. But then you also have the cost of the training. So the training that I recommend and what Kari does is training with a gluten detection trainer that it's owner training. So did the I did the training, but then I trained with a gluten detection trainer over Zoom, and you train either once or twice a week. So, Kari, do you want to talk about costs?
Training is, like Kendra said, once or twice a week for an hour. And it's basically us working over Zoom with your dog. It's different aspects of odor. That's how we train the alerts. And then, well, we start with imprinting and then we train the alerts. And I also do public access. So we train over Zoom. It depends on how many sessions you have per week, but it varies from 250 a month to 600 a month right now, just depending on how many um, sessions you have. That makes it a little more affordable. I know it's not super affordable. It's if instead of getting a dog like whatever $25,000 dog that's already finished and having to come up with that money, you can pay it over time. You can pay it monthly. Makes it a little bit easier for the people that do it. That's how I did it. That's how Kendra did it. And then, of course, the cost of the puppy, just depending on how much your puppy costs. And then, of course, vet bills and all that. The training itself is $600 or less per month, basically.
Yeah, yeah. And then you have extra costs. You have to feed a gluten-free diet, so that is a more expensive diet, but that's not out of line with what you would do if you had a pet. The other part is you will have like costs of pet insurance, which Carrie and I both recommend. And then you have additional gear. It's not excessive, but you're working a dog, you're going to have booties and you're going to have coats and things like that, depending on your environment that you're in. So the one thing that I do want to point out, because we talk about the differences in training, there are institutional programs where it's like somebody is making the dog and training the dog for you, and you get the dog. Those programs are generally you're paying a big lump sum up front, maybe a couple deposits. And that was one of the things that I'm like, this is hard because you don't. The other part of those training programs is they're training for a full year with that dog, and you're not training with the dog. And during that time period, and especially with this type of training, it's not like just training your dog a trick or behavior. You have to know your dog's body language, and that's super super important when you're working with your dog, because I have to know if I'm looking at Suki, and you'll see sometimes in my videos I will make her sniff again because she's not giving it a good sniff, or she acted not very certain about it. And that's body language. And you can only learn that by knowing your dog really well. And even early on, you didn't know. I mean, I think now, I mean, Suki's 5 years old, and it's 2 years to train the dog. That's kind of what it works. Sometimes it's a little more, sometimes it's a tiny bit less. But you get better as you go and the more confidence you have, because it's a hard thing. You're trusting this dog with your health. If she alerts wrong, which she can, she's a dog, she can make mistakes, but that's up to me also to see, is she really sniffing? Is she doing it? Do I have confidence in her giving that motion? And if I don't, then I need to put that food aside and have her check again. And if you don't know how to read your dog, you're not going to be an effective team. So,
Let's talk about the differences between gluten detection dogs and others alert dogs. And then also I want to talk about handler bias too. So basically the difference with a gluten detection dog, there's a couple different things. First of all, they're not just alerting to an odor. That's the easy part, like a bomb detection or, a bug, like a bed bug detection. I forget the dog's name, but he detects bed bugs. Dr. Sniffs, I think. Um, so they are not just detecting the odor. We also teach them, we teach them alert for gluten, and then we teach them alert for an all clear. So we're teaching two, whereas a different alert dog is just alerting to the presence of an odor, we also teach the dogs to alert to gluten-free, to no presence of the odor. And that's because we want them to get rewarded with each response. If we just rewarded for gluten, they would just alert to gluten all the time. We also teach them with other distractor odors. So gluten detection dogs don't just have to find the odor, they have to find it in many, many other distractor odors. When you think of what goes into like chicken parmesan or even just your salad and salad dressing, that is, those are distractor odors. The other thing is we don't just teach them to alert to the odor in an amount. We work on teaching them to alert down to trace amounts of gluten. We don't know exactly how much. It goes down to probably between 1 and 5 parts per million. We don't know yet. Hopefully that we'll be able to study that and find that out soon. But basically, those are the three main reasons. They also have to find the gluten in multiple different environments. So it's much different than not just, they're very important too, but say like a diabetic alert dog or a bomb sniffing dog. So that's the difference.
And the odor's different too. I think that's one of the questions that we got was, does gluten even have a scent? Can dogs smell it? And gluten is a really heavy molecule, so it doesn't float through the air. So if you think of like a diabetic alert dog, they're reacting to your scent going through the air. So if you look, there's some diabetic alert dogs on here, and the kids upstairs and the dogs all the way downstairs or outside on the front porch, and the dog notices because that scent travels. And same with like explosives, that scent is strong. Gluten is a much heavier molecule, so it doesn't float like that. It is there, but the dogs have to have it very close in front of them, and it requires a lot of concentration. I just did some videos today and did a room search so you could see how Suki searches the room. That's a fun thing we do for them. That's not a work thing. That's just one that they like to search for the gluten. But that's the big difference, and that's one of the reasons that the training can't really be shortened. So there's one of the questions here was if the training could be done in a shorter period of time. It takes that long because there's pieces of the training that go by really fast. Like the beginning part, I'd say goes really fast. The dogs get really good. And this is why we hear from a lot of people, I do, that, hey, I tried to train my dog and I got to this point, but I couldn't get further, because that's when it gets really hard with the dog. The more complex it is, for them to search for it, that's an easy trick. I could teach Nabi that really, really fast to detect gluten between plates, or, in bowls in a row, like the cup kind of game, or if you're doing scent trials when they're looking for scents in a room under boxes and things like that, that's not that challenging. It's when you add in the other scents and then you add in the distractions as well. The other part about gluten detection training is that we are teaching that gluten is in different forms. So gluten is not just in wheat, it's in rye and barley. So we have to differentiate those. And then it's also in different forms in that we start with just the pure odors and adding in really simple elements, like you'd have gluten versus, a green bean or something, and then to differentiate. But then you get complex food like chicken salad, or then you move on to plates and bowls and cups and liquids. So you have all these different things that you have to do it. And then packages is a whole nother level that is very challenging because every package is completely different and they have different issues and stuff like that. But the dog has to really drown out some of those other surrounding things that makes it really challenging. So it does take that full time to do it. Now, is a dog going to be able to help you at certain levels earlier than 2 years? Absolutely. So Suki was able to check my medicine within the first year, which was awesome. So that's a huge thing. That's a really simple. Working at home is way easier than working in public. And there's a whole nother level of skills. Although I know a lot of people think it's easy just to take dogs out to, restaurants and grocery stores and things like that. It's not, because those dogs need to have high levels of training. and you have to practice. I notice I don't go tons of places a lot because I work from home. And when I take Suki, I'm like, "Oh, we haven't been for a while." And then you can tell she's out of practice. Now her behavior bad? No, but she's not as adaptable as she is when we're working on it and we're practicing. So,
That's a
hopefully
good
that
point. After training, you're still working your dog. It never ends. Like, there's
yes.
maintenance training. Kendra and I both have our set of maintenance jars that are out all the time. We practice pretty much every day or every other day, keeping their skills up for odor, for sure.
Yeah. The other thing, we have somebody here said they have a medical alert dog that alerts to migraines. And that's one thing too about medical alert dogs. Often they will naturally alert. I get lots of comments. Well, my dog would alert to my mom's low blood sugar or migraine. Those dogs are just so sensitive that they naturally alert. Dogs don't naturally alert to gluten. So that's another reason that it does take longer and do that.
What other questions do we have?
There's one here, Carrie. Maybe you could talk about how a dog can help for migraines, or curious as she suffers from migraine and chronic disease. Oh, I guess she's writing to the migraine. Usually, with an alert dog, they don't help you with the problem. They just let you know that the problem is about to come. So you get a notice that, 15, 20, 30 minutes, sometimes hours long. If the dog alerts, there's a gal on here, a momming with migraine is her username. You can see her dog in action. And her dog, I think, actually came up with a natural alert, but he will lick her hand and then she knows, okay, I got to get myself comfortable. I need to, make sure that so people are watching my kids. And so she has an alert versus that migraine, because she gets really significant migraines where it changes her ability to function. It doesn't help with the migraine. It helps keep you safe if you are debilitated by the
Yeah,
migraine.
it's coming on very quickly. What else?
Do rescue dogs work or only certain breeds, Carrie? Do you want to talk to that one?
Sure. Rescue dogs can certainly work. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it, but it is, I mean, really any dog can smell. However, one thing you want to take into consideration is genetics. And, if you get a rescue dog that's 8 months old or a year old, that's awesome. Have rescued all these dogs are rescue dogs except for Birdie. I totally believe in rescue, but rescue dogs can have questionable genetics, which means they could also have health problems. They could also have genetic fear and anxiety that might not come out until later. And of course, with a service dog, it cannot be anxious or fearful for public access. I tell a story about my dog Turtle in one of the courses. I forget which one. Finding the right fit, I think. And I ended up. She was doing great with training, but I had to wash her from the program. She's a rescue, literally born under a tractor in Alabama. I had to wash her because she has a congenital liver defect. Now, can a purebred dog have that? Absolutely. But the reason I decided to go with a purebred dog with genetics that were proven, Birdie's dad has multiple service dogs in his line. That's why I picked her breeder. But also the breeder did something called early neurological stimulation and early scent introduction. We go through that in detail a ton in the courses, but it just improves your chances. You spend all this money, all this time, all this effort, which is, it's bonding, it's awesome. But then if your rescue dog ends up, developing, or their anxiety or fear gets worse, or they get a health problem, then you can't finish your dog. You have to wash them from the program. And it's traumatizing. It's very sad. But yeah, I they certainly can work. I just wouldn't necessarily, and it obviously depends on the breed too. So there's certain breeds that tend to do better with service dog training and gluten detection. We talk about these in the courses. I picked a lab because labs are high drive and goofy, and Birdie loves to work, and she'll just sniff. She'll just work, and has she's a very adaptable, where some breeds aren't. You can talk about Suki if you want. She's adaptable,
Yeah.
obviously, but she's a little more.
Yeah, it's different too. It depends on too where you're starting out in the process. So For example, Suki, I don't recommend Portuguese water dogs for people unless you're a Portuguese water dog person because they are very independent thinkers and she requires buy-in. Like I have to sometimes convince her that it's a good idea for her to do because they used to work the fishing boats in Portugal. So they'd have to like make up their own decisions. So she has to, it's kind of like a toddler. Sometimes you got to go, okay, we're doing this. Isn't it a great idea? And she's always going along with it, but it makes training so much harder. Where Birdie is much more like, okay, you want me to do it? Let me do it. Ready. And Suki's like, yeah, I don't know about that.
She does a cost benefit analysis. Suki
Yeah.
does.
Suki
She
does
also
cost.
works very differently than Birdie. Suki's very methodical. She's very like in her room searches, she has to sniff every little inch, whereas Birdie, she'll sniff and find the odor, but she's like, "Found it. Now let's do it again." Like it's just different. So anyway, it depends on kind of their work ethic. Or I shouldn't say that because Suki's ethic is great, but just the difference in breeds. Somebody asked about a corgi.
Yeah, somebody asked about a
Um,
corgi.
Corgi. I really love corgis. They're higher drive. They're not that big. So that might be an issue. 9 months I think would be a great age. Just depends on the dog, honestly, on the individual dog. But that might be a little bit too small. And of course, if the dog is a lot of herding dogs can have anxiety and they're very, very intelligent. They pick up on every nuance of their environment, which sometimes is a detriment. Not again for every dog, but um, yeah.
Well,
What
and I
else?
think one of the things in terms of characteristics of dogs is a big deal because even within the same litter or the same breed, dogs can be completely different. So the one that I always talk about is we have this neighborhood lab, and he is a field trial lab. Like his name is Spirit. He is very aptly named. He's not a service dog or anything, but that dog is insane, super well trained, very very obedient, but he has to be running
Hamster
24/7.
wheel.
He is on the go. He would not be a good gluten detection dog because he doesn't have that characteristics. And that's why some of this, when Kari's talking about herding dogs, I also get questions a lot about uh like huskies or border collies. Some of those dogs, like they just are, they want to be on the go. Like that's more what they are. And I mean, Suki has that too. She wants to be on the go. So then my need to exercise her is very high, and I had to work really hard to train her to relax and off switch. That's hard. Like that was probably one of the hardest things I had to train her in. So that's why it's like we want people to think about those things ahead of time. That's why we created the courses, because I didn't know all this stuff when I got Suki. And I was like, oh, I'm going to do this. And then I was like, what if I got myself into? Not that I would trade her, but it makes life a lot harder. Figuring these things out before you get your dog and before you think about training, you can know, hey, is this right for me or not? And that's why we did the courses. Okay, another question here. Okay, so this is good. Gluten and dairy. If I want to train for both gluten and dairy, I would make sure neither one of those, should I make sure that neither one? So you need to make sure that you're training one odor at a time. So you do gluten first and get them finished in gluten, and then you work on dairy. So you have to do that. And Kari, somebody asked if do you have any experience with training other odors than gluten? So, or you work with anything other than gluten?
Yeah. During my internship with Dawn, I did sunflower seeds, and that was really interesting. Very, very nice Australian Labradoodle, Elton. He just finished. Ow, God, she's digging her nails into me. And I also did diabetic alert. And just I didn't. The dog isn't finished yet, but I sat in on it. So just two other kind of alerts. I don't do that in like that's not what I train. I just train gluten. I don't have any interest in training anything else. But it's very interesting. Like there's so many things. Dawn does a lot of allergens. I don't know exactly how many, but That's for other trainers, not me.
Yeah, Dawn Choi at Willow Service Dogs, which she is the original, scent gluten detection trainer, and she's on our last course, which is
Mhm.
proper scent handling for gluten. Yeah, definitely, can reach out. The courses still apply for other allergens, especially the first two. So somebody was talking about timing of finding a Dalmatian puppy. I'll let you talk about that in a second, but I'm going to take the first part and the trainer. So the first two courses that we have really go through the what you need in a puppy, what the process looks like, breed choices versus your lifestyle, your other needs. And then the second course is totally detailed on what breeder to find, red flags with breeders, what to ask breeders, what testing and training the breeders need to do. And each one of the courses have workbooks that go with them so that you can take that and you can be really equipped to do that. So the students that we've had that have taken the courses said they were night and day because there are lots of red flags out there with breeders, and you want to do your homework in that because the quality of that work that you put in at the beginning is going to help you in the end. The other part about that is within the litter, you need to test those puppies as well, because even within a litter, the puppies are not the same, and you want to get the
Yeah,
best puppy within the
this
litter.
is her litter was case in point, so everyone was different.
Yeah. So somebody asked about the process and timing of finding a Dalmatian puppy with early scent exposure and a trainer at the right time. So I don't know if you want to talk about the Dalmatian part and
Yeah,
maybe.
Dalmatians have great noses. They're a great size. I don't have a ton of experience with Dalmatians. I don't have any with gluten detection. I have some from my private practice. I've been a dog trainer for 30 years and I have specialized in anxiety and aggression for 30 years. They're nice dogs. I would say that it would just, again, depend on the puppy. I like the early scent introduction and the early neurological stimulation first if the breeder's doing that. And it would just have to have a fairly calm breed line, um, and, potential service dogs in the breed line.
And you always wanna make sure too that the breeder is providing genetics and stuff like that, especially for dogs that may have hereditary conditions, and that you can make sure that they're
Yes.
testing for those type of things. And that goes for whatever breed, and we go through that in finding the right fit. It's really, really important. So even if you're getting a puppy just for, your own personal life, it would be well worth it to do it to make sure that you're not getting like somebody I know got a really cute puppy that they said was a golden doodle, and yet it turned white after a while. The dog had been dyed. So there's a lot of those people out there, and you don't want those even if you're
So
getting a
many
dog.
horror stories. Poor
So
Kendra.
many.
You hear all the horror stories. You get all the DMs and all the,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, and
so
that's the
sad.
whole reason I created the courses, because it breaks my heart. I hear these horror stories all the time of people spending all this money and ending up with a dog that cannot do it, a dog that's broken, that has been trained improperly and can't be retrained. I'm like, how can we fix this? I can't share this. So that's why we created it. I also don't want people getting a dog and going, it's way over my head. I can't do it. So having information before you go into it will save you a lot of heartache in the process. And when you start with the puppy, you start right away when they come home. We talked about that a little bit earlier. Okay, what legal barriers have you come up against? I haven't really come up with any. I am in California. It's very dog friendly. My issues are on the other side. It's way too permissive that just everyone and their brother brings their dogs everywhere. And that causes issues because they're not trained. I don't know. What about you, Carrie? Any legal barriers?
Nope, nope. I
So
mean,
I know.
we know our rights, so we know the ADA, we know the law, we know, I mean, if I did come up against something, I would know what to say. I would say will say that, it's always possible. There's only, certain questions people can ask, and I've heard other stories about, oh, where's the dog's paperwork or whatever, but I haven't experienced anything. I think it's for me having a Labrador, they're more common as service dogs, so I know pretty sure that's why I don't get questioned. Plus she's just phenomenal out in public. If you had like I have a pit bull in my program right now who's phenomenal. He's so good. His name's Diesel. I think she has a little more tough time with that. So I would say that it probably, and I'm guessing, I'm totally generalizing, that it would be more difficult with a breed that's not a standard looking service dog. But in Minnesota, people bring their dogs everywhere too, and it's maddening. Like that's not they do the fake service dog thing. So
Yeah,
frustrating.
and there is no service dog registry in the United States, so there are no paperwork or certificates or anything like that. That's about the only thing that we do run into is where establishments are maybe misinformed and they say things like, "Oh, we need to, you have to show us your paperwork." Yeah, there is no paperwork. So that's that. And we do talk a little bit about the legalities and stuff like that in the first course. So it does give you a lot more information and how that works. Um, uh, so Kiva Lara got kicked off about the corgi question. I'll go quick, like really fast about that. Corgi could be at 9 months, you're in a good spot. The challenge with the corgi is just their height. And it would be the same thing I talked about earlier is they just would have to stretch and it'd be harder for you leaning down. They could do the work. And at that age, it's the right age to do it.
Yeah. It
So
depends on
you
the
could
temperament too.
yeah, it depends on the temperament. So you could schedule a consultation or an evaluation and see if you wanted to do that. We have an article on our website. It's on the homepage, so celiacservicedogs.com, and it goes through everything that you need to think about if you want to train your own dog and kind of what next steps are with that. Okay, do your dogs ever voluntarily alert on something if you're at a friend's house?
I don't think Birdie has. It's possible. And I just missed it because she freezes. But we do teach them that we present the item, except for room search. I mean, if there was gluten hidden in the couch, Birdie would find it, but Suki would too. So we train them to alert with food that we present. It's not like they just walk around sniffing everybody's food. It's a very controlled situation.
Yeah, if and it's not an always on. So like a diabetic alert, a seizure alert, a cardiac alert, those dogs are always
Good
on.
point.
So they're constantly sniffing. Ours is on presentation or upon command. So even room search, Suki's not going to search a room unless I tell her search. And otherwise, so she's not on. So you could have a full on dozen cookies hidden underneath something and she's not going to alert to it unless I tell her because she doesn't go around sniffing stuff like that. The one time Suki has done it is if people like hold plates out to her or something, then if she has something in a plate in front of her, she will sniff it and she will check it. She's not going to eat it unless I tell her to eat it. So not every dog is that way, but yeah. Yeah, so that's how that works. Great questions. Okay, somebody asked
These are
about
really good.
Birdie. I'm assuming cuz Birdie's in your lap, how many pounds is Birdie?
She is about 55 pounds right now. She's a tiny little lab. She's my pocket lab. She's a chocolate lab too. Not that that makes any difference in size, but she has to be in my lap constantly. She's a Velcro dog. She would love to be inside my skin 100% of the time. So that's just what Labradors want. Suki's the opposite.
Suki is not. You see her over my shoulder. If you can see that, she is just laying on the bed behind me. And she, a lot of times, is downstairs when I'm upstairs. She is very much a dog that
Independent little girl.
she's an independent girl. She's an independent
Yeah.
girl. I have to bribe her to cuddle with me sometimes. Although she does not like it if I'm off doing other things. So she likes to be with me. So, Kari, do you know of any students who have gluten detection dogs at college?
I do. Yeah. I think I know a couple of them. It's totally possible, and I think it's hard. I think it's hard for students to have a gluten detection dog at college. I know if you think about the responsibility, taking care of a dog is one thing, but when you're working a service dog, this is probably the one thing I want people to understand the most. It is a very hard to work a service dog out in public because you cannot turn yourself off for 1 second. And it's mentally and emotionally and physically draining. Do I do it? Absolutely. You know, Birdie and I are a team. It's part of the deal. At college, I think it would be harder. It's totally possible. Of course, there's, you know, college students that could do it. I do know a couple of them, and I think that they have it's a standard poodle and a labradoodle, or maybe it's a Moyen poodle. So yeah, they go to class with the students, they go to the lunch hall or whatever, they go to lectures, all that, and then they live with the student in the dorm room or in their apartment. But that student is then, you know, I would think if I had a gluten detection dog or any service dog at college, it would be, you know, probably a little socially limiting too. Like you can't really be social when you have a service. I shouldn't say that. When you're working a service dog, no one um, can pet your dog. They can't talk to your dog. So it does make it a little socially isolating. You're like, sorry, can't talk to me, can't talk to my dog. So that would be, you know, the things I would think about for college.
Yeah, and it does, you stand out when you have a service dog, and
Everybody talks to.
I did not realize how different it was. And like, I'm an outgoing person, right? So if you have an issue and you're very challenged about, very introverted, don't want to talk to people in public and stuff like that. That's something to really keep in mind because everyone does talk to you. They make kissy noises as you're walking up and down the aisles at the dog. They, oh, hi, cutie, and stuff like that. And it's really hard to stay focused and you stand out. Like people are going to go, oh, what's wrong with you? And you do get those kind of weird, people are strange. You get those kind of questions too. So it's something I didn't think about before because celiac disease is an invisible illness, right? But you have a dog and they're like, oh, wow, you've got something going on with you, and then you always get, or are you training that dog for someone? So
I
that's
will
good.
say that Birdie has a new vest. Well, it's not new. It's probably, I don't know, 6 months old, but I got her a new vest because her old one said gluten detection dog and celiac alert dog or whatever. And I got her a new one that just says medical alert dog. So then I get much less questions. Oh my God, a I mean, I want to tell people about gluten detection, but hers just says medical alert dog, service dog or something like that. Service dog for medical alert. And that's it. And I get a lot less. Turtles, when she was in the program, hers had her name on it. It had gluten detection dog in training. Like I knew nothing back then. I would not recommend that. Don't put your dog's name on it. People are going to call your dog's name. That vest is long gone. It lasted like a month. So yeah, just things to consider.
The other thing I want to talk about working a dog, and I see somebody put cross contact and disabling events in college dorms
Oh,
and cafeterias. It's a hard, I mean, the reality of life, that is really, really challenging in college. But the one thing about working a dog in public that I think is super important too is you have to always watch out for that dog and think about that dog's needs. Just like if you went with a small child, you have to make sure, is it too crowded for them? Are they overwhelmed? Do we have to take them to the bathroom? Do we have to, give them water and stuff like that? And it's really hard because there's times when you go, I need to go to that. And it would be so easy. I need to bring her with me, but then it might not be a smart thing because it's too hot, it's too whatever, too crowded, too loud. And those are all the things. I went to a party a few weeks ago. It was an outdoor party and it wasn't crowded. It was nice, but they had a band. Well, my friends were all sitting right next to the band. And I'm like, I can't sit next to the band because I have Suki and it's going to be hard on her ears. So then I had to sit further away, which was still really nice. But it's something that you have to consider. So there are definitely things that happen with that. Somebody wanted to know, Kari, this is a good one for you, how you train labs to not eat everything you want them to check.
well, it's a process and it takes time. You know, we start with gluten detection, the odor and the food is presented in a very controlled way. It's literally called controlled search. We never teach leave it to gluten detection dogs. We don't want them to leave. Yes, we want them to leave stuff alone, but as a cue, as a command, the behavior We want them to be able to explore their environment. We want them to be able to not think, "Oh, I can't touch that. I can't sniff it. I can't go near it." That just makes it a lot harder. And so I, have certain strategies. It just depends on the dog. But in the beginning, it is very controlled. And Birdie did a lot of licking of the control jars in the beginning. She's licked plates. She's never eaten anything off a plate. She just knows that she's working. And we worked very hard for that. She's also you wouldn't know it if you met her probably, but when she's working, she's very focused and calm. She's a wing nut all the other times, like, that's just how she is, but she's a very calm lab, and she's a very focused lab. So, yeah, I mean, there's some labs that would not excel at this, like, 'cause they have to eat everything, and they just get so excited, and, "Oh my god, food," and she's very food motivated, but it's a process, and so, she just learned over time. You don't lick it, you don't well, she can touch it because she's sniffing it, but, it's teaching them to calm, it's teaching them focus, it's teaching them their job, and when they get a package or a plate or a bowl, I mean, in 2 years, it didn't take her 2 years to learn it, but that's what we work on in 2 years is just that calm, "Okay, focus, I'm just sniffing," and then I alert because then she gets a reward for whatever she alerts to, gluten or gluten-free. I would say it's not that hard, it just depends on the dog. Everyone asks that question all the time, like, "Oh, doesn't she eat all your food?" She doesn't because I worked with her very methodically and carefully, and with any dog, that's not part of the job. So she knows when she gets her bowl or she gets a treat or whatever, she gets to eat. Um so, she'll definitely if I'm eating, like, on the couch, she's, like, 6 inches from me, not eating my plate, but she likes to be near it. She wants to check it. Anyway, it's really not that hard, that's my point.
No,
So,
it's funny, when I realized Suki was really got it, was her first birthday, and I got her a patty. I've told this story before, from In-N-Out, like a pup patty, and I was so excited. I'm like, "Oh, I'm gonna be like one of those cool Instagram people that gives my dog a birthday party," and, I had this patty in my hand, it's wrapped in paper, and I held it out to her to bite, and she sniffed it and she booped my leg. And that was the first time she booped something like that I just had loose in my hand. And I,
cute.
it was so cute. I have it on video somewhere. I mean, it's not a very good video because it was like me holding the camera. But they do more of that because you've done all this training up ahead to do it, so I think that's it. One of the and I think this is probably close to we might have time for, like, one more question after this. Do you feel 100% confident eating what your dog alerts as gluten-free? I definitely do. I'd say early on, it feels like you're kinda stepping out without a parachute sometimes, like, "Oh, I don't know." 'Cause it seems so unrealistic that this dog does it, especially, like, Suki boops so fast. I mean, you've seen the videos, it's so fast. So that's why a lot of times I make her do it again because I
I
wanna
just
make
talked about her the other day, I'm like, "Suki boops like that." She
so
sniffs
fast.
in a nanosecond.
Because
Talk
sometimes
about
she's
handler bias. Blind trials, sorry.
yeah,
That's
that's what I
why.
was gonna say. So when we go through the training, you're training, that's part of the 2 year because you are being trained. And at the very end of training, you do blind trials where you have cups of stuff that I, as a handler, do not know what's in it. And so you have her sniff, she gives an alert, and then I have to look at the bottom of the container and see what was in there. So they're the same weight and everything, and they're completely blind to me. That's was probably the hardest part of training for me because you really don't have a clue. But that gives you the confidence that she's doing it because every time you go to a restaurant, it's blind. You don't know what's in there for sure. What do you want to
Yep.
add to that, Carrie? Do you feel confident about Birdie?
I do. I would say that I know that I don't use her enough and use her as much as you do, Kendra, as you use Suki. I just don't go out that much, but I do like to travel and I don't venture out as much as I should to non-dedicated restaurants and places like that. I use her more at home, but I do trust her. Birdie passed her blind trials before she passed mealtime. Don't ask me how, but she was like on it to her blind trials. And Don was like, "Whoa, that's the first time that's ever happened." I don't know. She's just weird. But yeah, and then there's also the handler bias. Like we make sure that we work very hard that we're not giving the dog cues in whatever way. This is something else we talk about in the courses. But I would say that there isn't such thing as 100% accuracy. I wish there was. Probably, I mean, we try and get them to like 95, 96, 97% accuracy. There's always a chance. But if you think about it, we're not actively eating gluten food, right? Like it would probably be more cross contact, maybe. I don't know. But this isn't 100%, zero sum game as far as with gluten detection. But we know our dogs. We can tell when they're sniffing. We know, I mean, I could totally tell when Birdie's guessing. I'm like, no, girlfriend, you got to sniff that again. You guessed. So
Yeah, I do the same thing with Suki, and if I'm not confident, I will put the plate aside and have her check something else that I know is gluten-free, like a glass of water, and
yes,
then go back and check again. So there's often times when you see me going through it, and if I don't have a high level of confidence, then I won't eat it. And I will say it is hard, and I just encountered this recently. Suki alerted to something that I bought at home, and I wanted to eat it so badly because it's like I just sprained my
certified.
ankle. I'm on
Yeah,
crutches. It was a gluten-free pizza. I was really excited about it, and I wrapped it up. I had her check it on different plates, and then I was like, "I can't it's hot out of the oven," and I put it back in the fridge, and I was like, "I'm gonna have her check it later," and then I had her check it with foil over it, thinking, "No, she's still alerted." Then I put it in a Ziploc bag because I just couldn't let that go, and she's still alerted, so it got thrown away this week, but
I think that
that's
happens more than the other. That
yeah,
happens. They alert to stuff that we expect to be gluten free, and you're like, guess I can't eat it. It's so disappointing. Instead of the not alerting if there's gluten in it. That's happens way more often. The
yeah,
first one.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
so disappointing, but that's what we have them
Uh,
for. I tell my
that's
students.
That's what we have them for. Okay, so pandemic parenting said, "Have you eaten street food?" So, I mean, I've gone to vendors at different, like at farmers market and had stuff there. The thing is, it doesn't make the food any safer. So you still have to ask all the questions. So I'm not going to go someplace like a Taco Bell and try and eat that because it's not going to be safe. Like it's not worth my time and effort and money to buy food to have Sugi check it. But there are places that you go and you ask and you're like, there's for example, a place that they here in San Diego, they make these hash brown sandwiches. They're amazing. And it was very low risk. They only had a couple things that were gluten. And so I was like, great, I'm gonna eat that. And Suki didn't alert to it. She cleared it and they're amazing. So I think there's things like that. It opens the world up a lot more. Oh, at the farmer's market too, one time I ate some kind of Indian food, or maybe it was it might have been African food. It was so delicious, but I had to ask all the questions and make my decisions that it wasn't really I was at that party that I went to, they had a street taco vendor. That was a little I was like, "Okay, hopefully she's really right on with this one," because they didn't really they're like, "We have beans." And I'm like, "No, no gluten." "Oh, we have beans." And I was like, "Yeah, this is a language barrier." But Suki cleared it and they were totally fine. So that's the thing. So I think the only other one we had was somebody asking about dogs leaving like chicken bones on a walk and stuff like that.
Scary. You just train and train and train and train and train, ignoring it. I use the cue watch me. I've used it my whole career, paying attention to me when I don't want my dogs to, interact with somebody, not eat goose poop, whatever. And you just train an alternative that takes their attention away from the thing. There's a video on Instagram of Birdie walking by a paper plate on the ground, and she knows it's there, but she just keeps walking because she knows there's no reward there. The reward's back with me. And it's constant, constant, constant training. That's part of the public access too. Test, your dog has to walk by dropped food on the ground, and it's really, really hard, but we constantly work on it.
Really hard. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. If you're not already following Kari, please follow her at Celiac Service Dogs. And definitely check out our courses at celiacservicedogs.com. And even if you're considering it 2 years from now, because it will give you what you need to plan. And that was the whole reason we decided to do it. And if you have a dog and you're ready to do it, go through and get started or book a consultation. You can book time with me and we can do a one-on-one session where we kind of answer questions and go through everything. Kari and I are going to be doing these more often here on Instagram and also on YouTube. So, and I do them on TikTok too. So we will cover all the bases. Anything else you want to add, Kari, before we end?
I just wanna thank everybody for coming. So we're gonna start doing this more often.
Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
exciting.
Thank you so much for joining us. And I hope everybody has a wonderful evening. Thanks so much, Kari.